Hey everyone, so I am prepping for tomorrow's live masterclass, and because there is so much content to teach, I'm going to be cutting my story a little bit short and just giving you a brief introduction. So I thought I would jump on here and share a little bit more about my pain story and my journey into this mind-body connection work, psychosomatic therapy and emotional releasing, which tomorrow I'm going to share with you that this work is so much more than just releasing your emotions. So this has been a bit of a whirlwind journey over the past several years, but especially in the last year. But I started to get into the psychosomatic work and all this mind-body work about 9 years ago now. So I trained as an osteopath, a musculoskeletal therapist. I did that training over in Australia, and I really just kind of fell into that profession. I am very grateful for it and the journey that it has taken me on, and this is something that I teach, is just really trust in the process wherever it is you want to be. And it was 4 years in that I was getting really disgruntled with the results, or rather the lack of results that I was getting with my clients. So they were coming in for their pain, their issues, they had some mental stuff going on, and I just didn't really know what to do with it. And all of the skills and techniques that I had been taught just weren't really cutting it. And I could tell there was emotional stuff going on, and I didn't really know how to deal with it. So in the midst of it, I was also going through my own little pain story, my crisis point, which is about my skin. So from a very young age, since I was a teenager, I started to get pimples and acne, which I thought were bad at the time, but 9 years ago, it got really severe. And I went down the pathway of going on conventional medicine, so antibiotics, every sort of skin cream, chemical peels, beauty therapy treatments, taking supplements, eventually taking Roaccutane, and all of those things worked really well. I wasn't really aware of natural therapies at the time. I wasn't brought up in a family that embraced a lot of natural therapies. My parents are in the more conventional medical world with their jobs, and yeah, I went down the conventional pathway, and all these things worked for me at the time, but every time I came off this medication, my skin would just break out, and it was like it would rebound. It would come back 10 times worse. So it was all over my face, my chest, my back when I was younger, and then it got really bad 9 years ago. And this is when my mind just opened up to all of this psychosomatic work. So my skin had been on and off good, and then by this time I had started to embrace natural therapies. So I was going to see an acupuncturist, I was going to see a herbalist, and my husband often jokes that the herbs that I used to brew up looked like cockroaches, twigs and tar seal, but I was so desperate, and this stuff just like reached the house out. But I would drink this 3 times a day and my skin would be great, but again, even the natural therapies, when I went off them, my skin would get worse again. And I found myself in Brisbane, which is a really hot and humid environment, and it was about 4 weeks in, my skin just completely exploded. This is like the worst acne that I had ever experienced. It was all over my face, like big sore ones that would last for a couple of months at times. And having Asian skin, once the thing's gone, you're still left with some scarring and pigmentation. And it was on my chest and my back, but again, worse than when I was a teen. And quite painful, but more so psychologically painful, if anything. And I felt like I was the person who had tried everything. But in the midst of this, I don't get a lot of physical pain and injury in my body, which is interesting. Being a musculoskeletal therapist, I still felt like I could treat people really well who were presenting with that pain. But I had a very minor rock climbing injury in my neck, and I also started to get all sorts of random pains in my body, particularly stiff ankles. I got very sick at this time as well. So just random fevers, flu type things that would last for 24 hours and not really have a reason behind it. And I remember getting an ulcer on my eye, and I started taking painkillers just to stay at work. And I felt so incongruent as a physical therapist that was trying to help people, medicating myself, doing all of these things, spending a lot of money. And I found myself being very much like my clients or my patients that I was seeing who were so desperate to find a fix for their issues. Mine was mainly my skin. Theirs were their musculoskeletal issues and anything else that was going on in their life. And I realize now, and this is something that a lot of people get caught up in, is I realized that I was doing too much. Like, I was looking for external help, even though it was natural. I did some horrible stuff to my skin, like put a lot of nasty chemicals on it to try and make it better as well. But even when it came to treatment for my neck and my shoulder, I was constantly doing stuff like stretching it out, going to yoga, going to see the osteo. Can you crack my neck? Can you do this? Can you just stick a needle in it and it will all be better? And it was when I eventually went to meet a psychosomatic therapist, this was the start of my journey that really opened my mind. It was great because this person was actually a massage therapist, trained in a bit of psychosomatic therapy, wasn't like the qualified registered practitioner out there. And it was him that spoke to me, that I really listened to. And I didn't know why I kept on going back to him, but something in my body was resonating with it, even though my mind couldn't make sense of it. And I was doing too much. So the solution to my little musculoskeletal thing was to just leave it alone, stop doing things, stop massaging it, stop stretching it. And sure enough, it actually went away. And it didn't bother me for a long time. So sometimes for you as a client, if you're going through stuff, just pick up. And this is like a warning sign for me when I'm seeing clients, when they're seeing so many therapists out there and it actually becomes quite stressful to get to all of their appointments and they're not really progressing. That if you are trying so many things and they're just not working, is start to look at the emotions. And this is the hard thing to look at. So if I go back to my pain story, which really is around my skin and the cystic acne that I was having, everything in my life was great. The money, the friends that I had, my relationship, which was long distance at the time. I loved my work. I felt like everything was great. But this is when I got to discover the really holistic view. So the impact that our environment and the climate, the temperature that we live in, how that can impact health. So this is what I'm going to be covering a little bit in the masterclass tomorrow, is about doshas, but I'm just sharing my story so that I don't take up all this time teaching tomorrow, is that I am primarily a pitta dosha with a bit of vata in me. So pittas are made up of fire and water. And also, like in Chinese medicine, my liver is a little bit angry. I was a very fiery, angry teenager. My dad always said that I'd make a great lawyer because I could just argue anyone down to the ground. And, you know, with the history of all the medications, the pill, the antibiotics, the Roaccutane that I had taken, I think that this probably put a huge load on my liver as well. So my liver was a weak spot whenever I went to the Chinese medicine therapist. It would be like, oh, you've got a lot of heat and damp in your liver. So that, coupled with being a pitta, you chuck me in Brisbane, which is a hot and humid environment, I reached my threshold after about 4 weeks. So I'm constantly talking about your cup getting too full, but my climactic cup got too full, and that's when my skin just started breaking out and it got worse and worse and worse. And I was just like, what is going on? So as I started to open my mind to the mind-body connection and these emotions that, you know, I wasn't really getting results with my clients, I had to do my own work. So I went to study to do psychosomatic therapy thinking I was doing it for my clients, and I now train practitioners and everyone thinks that they're coming on the training to help their clients, but first they must start with themselves. And so yes, wood element person for sure, very true. So what I worked out my skin was trying to tell me, and there are a lot of individual interpretations, so don't just take this for a given if you've got skin problems, but my acne, my skin problems were really communicating to me about my internal and external world boundaries. So intuitively, as this osteopath, I wanted to work this way. I wanted to get into people's emotions. I felt like I could see into their body and see what was going on, but I didn't know what to do about it. And me talking about the Chinese medicine therapist telling me that I've got like damp and heat in my system, or an Ayurvedic practitioner telling me my pitta's out of balance, I was like, great. And you might have felt this way. That's great. Okay, you're telling me this. You're telling me I've got these stuck emotions in here, but what the hell do I do about it? So part of my pain story was I left Brisbane after 6 months because I was just doing a locum, and I moved back to where I live now, which is Wanaka, New Zealand. It's very dry. It's the snow. I absolutely love it. And I wasn't working that much, but in about 6 weeks, my skin completely cleared without having to spend the thousands of dollars and, you know, drinking that horrible tea that I was drinking from the Chinese herbalist and getting all the beauty treatments. And it just cleared up. I was like, okay. And then 6 months later, I decided to take the same position back in Brisbane, thinking I'm a renewed person, I am evolved, I have healed myself, I've worked on my gut. And I went back to Brisbane, and 4 weeks to the day, I hit my threshold and my skin broke out again. But this time it was even worse. So Angie's saying, hot and humid Brisbane, you love it, my favourite weather condition. So you might be a Vata or a Kapha who really like that heat and that humidity. So I went back, and with my knowledge of this mind-body connection now and how my body was speaking to me, I actually found it really amusing, even though I was in pain. So this is one of the shifts that people have when they start doing the emotional work, is they find amusement in the pain that their body gives them, rather than this frustration and wanting to get rid of it. And it is so true that our pain can help us really evolve into the person that deep down we always are, like being our authentic selves. I'll just read these comments. So I feel that way. Chinese medicine, food therapy and emotions is a great way to rebalance. Love this sharing. Cool. So yeah, just going into my pain story so that I don't like take up too much time on tomorrow's masterclass. So the bad cystic acne came up, but then also rashes. And the rashes were just fascinating where they appeared on my body. So I had them all on my joint lines, so my elbow, my knees, just all the joint lines. It was really, really strange. And at this point, this is one of the times that I was getting really sick, and I just am not the kind of person that gets sick all the time. So I knew something was wrong. And I remember sitting there with my stiff, or in the mornings with my stiff ankles, I would have to walk down the stairs and hold onto the handrail. And with everything going on, I was like, man, I feel like I'm going to trigger an autoimmune condition. I don't know what autoimmune condition, but something is breaking down in my body, and I don't know what to do about it, because I'm looking at all of my life areas and everything is just really amazing. So what's going on? And talking about the rash and the location on my body, that's what I'm going to be talking about chakras tomorrow, because it doesn't really matter what your condition or your ailment is, which is why I've moved away talking about this means this, because you've got to look at so many different facets in your life. So it's more about, the chakras tell you more about the location in your body that you've got the issue, and therefore what emotions might be going on. So I combine like the organs, the presentation, the condition, the chakras, the Ayurveda. So I interweave a lot of different clinical experience, life experience, and Eastern philosophies into how I use this work with people. So even now, after learning all of this stuff in the psychosomatic therapy, because a lot of people ask me, you know, what training did you do? So you did this. I'm like, well, psychosomatic therapy was a pivotal moment in my time. This was at the start of like this career change, but it is not what I do now, because it still missed the part of emotional processing, which I'm really big on. Anyway, so this is the first time I ever left a job early. I was just so miserable in my skin. And for anyone who has skin problems, I hear you, because it is more psychological. It can actually be physically painful, but you know, the people with the musculoskeletal pain would say, I'll take your skin problems over my back pain, and the person with skin problems would rather the back pain. So it's always this whole thing of want what you don't have. Okay, so yeah, I was just like, something's up. And in the midst of all this, I was trying every single diet under the sun, and I thought I was a very healthy eater, but I now look back on it as being very controlling. So again, what can I eat to make my skin better? So